Welcome to an interview edition of Your Daily Detroit, recorded on Friday, March 15th, 2019. I'm Sven Gustafson. On today's show, we talk about some big issues facing the recycling industry with Joe Munem, who heads up government affairs and public relations for GFL Environmental USA, a large waste hauler and recycling business. It turns out municipal recycling, you know, the bins full of plastic containers, glass bottles, and paper that you put out on the curb each week, well, it's facing some major challenges, and your curbside recycling program could soon get a lot more expensive, or go away entirely. We think it's a pretty fascinating conversation, and it's up right after this. This episode of Daily Detroit is supported by our members on Patreon. You can help us push Detroit's conversation forward at patreon.com/dailydetroit. And thanks. All right, on a recent episode, I went on a little side rant during a story about a new drop-off program for unused pharmaceutical drugs at Meijer. It went a little like this. And I also want to just give another shout to Meijer, at least to the 8 Mile and Woodward location, which is near me. I don't know that that's technically a supercenter. I don't think they have a pharmacy there, but what they do have is they offer a bin where you can recycle your plastic bags, which everybody's, you know, if you keep them, everyone's got a million. The world's got too many plastic bags. And I'm on this real rant lately because I read a story about how terrible plastic is for the planet, and that's it. Well, friends, that caught the attention of today's guest, Joe Munem of GFL Environmental. He emailed us and offered himself up as a guest to talk about what he said were some tough choices facing communities that offer residential recycling services. It's gotten so bad, in fact, that the city of Westland has started landfilling its recyclable material. For more on why, let's go straight to the tape. All right, Joe. So you say that there are some huge issues affecting the recycling industry in the United States, and that's trickling down, obviously, to everybody here in the Detroit area. What's the issue? What's going on?
Well, actually, it's not just the United States, it's worldwide. One of the largest consumers, actually the largest consumer formerly, was the People's Republic of China.
Okay.
They were taking the vast majority of this mixed recyclables and sorting through it and getting that material to be recycled. So
in other words, the recycling that we put out on our curb every week here, wherever you live in Detroit, ends up getting put on a container ship, I assume, and then shipped halfway around the world to China for processing.
Generally, what you have around Metro Detroit communities is something known as single stream recycling, where you have a bin or a cart, and all of the recyclables that are accepted by whoever your hauler might be go into that. And
you don't have to separate anything like you used to.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that is picked up by a separate truck that takes it to something called a material recovery facility, or as we call it, a MRF.
MRF, I love that.
And there it's put on a conveyor belt, and there are employees who sort by hand, and there are some very complicated machines that separate these materials into metal, plastics, the different grades of plastic.
Yeah, the 2, the 1, the 9s, whatever, yeah.
And then, you know, these things are then sorted, baled, and sent to, you know, to the mills for whoever's buying them at the time, because recyclables are, after all, a commodity. And the price fluctuates wildly. Well, a lot of the...
Based on demand for
recyclables.
Okay.
Formerly, a lot of the mixed paper and plastics were being put on container ships and sent to China. And one reason for that was when container ships come over here to bring all the goods that they're building in China, there's a very cheap rate when they have to go back to China on these empty ships. So they were putting all these recyclables on there. And previously, China had been accepting about a 20% rate of contamination. And by contamination, people don't always follow the guidelines that they're told to of what they can and cannot put in those bins or carts.
So, for example?
Food or diapers or
Ew.
a laundry detergent. And the bottle for laundry detergent, typically like a number 2 plastic, would be okay. But if they leave detergent in there,
which I'm sure a lot of people do,
without rinsing it out.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work in bars, and it drive me crazy how many people would leave, an inch or two of beer at the bottom of their bottles, which, those were all being recycled, obviously, and I had to dump them out because otherwise it'd make a mess. But anyway.
Yeah, if that leaks over everything else, you've now made that everything else non-recyclable. So China had previously decided that they were going to go with the 20% rate of contamination. They changed their national policy and went to a 0.5% rate of contamination, which cratered the market about a year ago.
And why did they make that decision? Any idea?
They decided that they were getting way too much garbage and not enough value from recyclables.
Okay.
That this no longer made sense for them economically.
Okay.
However, the markets in the United States and throughout the world, Europe, is everywhere, for this stuff no one was ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
So materials that used to be profitable to recycling companies here, now you have to pay the MRFs considerably more to separate that. Also, in what we're experiencing,
how much more are we talking about?
It's wild swings. I mean, it's in some places it's over $100 per ton.
Per ton.
Yeah, I mean it varies throughout the United States. It just depends where you are.
Mm-hmm.
The real problem, though, is that this affected their capacity because they had to slow their lines down and hire more people to sort.
Now, these are the MRFs, the material resource facilities in the Detroit area or Michigan or whatever.
Everywhere
in the country.
Yeah. And what you've seen now, because there's no place to take it and the markets have bottomed out, are warehouses and docks where these bales of recyclables are being piled to the sky. Now, there are still some countries who've been taking these over, particularly in Asia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and they'll take it 1 month and then get overwhelmed with it and then stop taking it.
And they're taking it at the old, 20% or whatever contaminated rate, higher rate.
Higher rate. Yeah. I can't tell you exactly what their rates are. I'm sure it varies.
Mm-hmm.
But when they can't get rid of it and there's junk, that's where you're starting to see a lot of this stuff wind up in the ocean.
Wow. All right, so what does this mean? I mean, you're talking about this higher cost and everything. Who's that affecting? And I mean, what does this all mean for those of us who want to be conscientious and continue to recycle?
Invariably, it means it's going to cost you more if you want to recycle. The haulers, the recyclers, can simply not absorb these kind of increases.
Mm-hmm.
So these costs have to be passed along. There are items that are not going to be as desirable. In fact, a lot of communities have told their residents, we're not taking number 3 through number 7 plastics anymore because there's just no market for it. A lot of places aren't taking glass anymore because glass has never been a particularly good market. So you'll probably see in a lot more places going back to the older days of source separation, where
you have to keep your paper separate and your plastic separate and glass separate.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Sterling Heights, and Sterling Heights has both curbside recycling, but they also have drop-off centers.
Mm-hmm.
And at the drop-off center, you take newspaper and put it in the newspaper bin. You take the plastics, put them in the plastics, metals and metals. That's called source separation, and it is absolutely cleaner than dumping everything into one bin.
So have we seen, are there cities around the region that have started to, increase their prices for recycling?
No, I mean,
or cut back services?
You're going to see that more and more. Most notably, and it was in the news just a couple weeks ago, the city of Westland notified their residents that because of the increase that they realized in hauling their recyclables, that for the time being, they're taking the recyclables to be landfilled.
Wow.
That's an option. Another option would be taking it to Detroit Renewable Power, which is the only waste-to-energy facility in the metropolitan Detroit area. And at least you could take those recyclables there and get electricity and steam out of them, which, is in reality a form of recycling.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a thought that maybe China is doing us a favor, because before, when they were taking this stuff, we didn't have to think about this in a long-term way, and now we're being forced to.
Right. You're talking about, we were previously sending all of this material to China, and, more recently we're finding other countries in Asia and elsewhere that are willing to take it, at least until they get overwhelmed. Does it suggest that there's room in the United States to develop a more robust recycling industry, or does the market just not exist for it?
The markets don't exist right now, but I'm always confident in American ingenuity that somebody will look at something and say, here's how I can make a buck off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that needs to be explored. Someone needs to figure that out. In the meantime, we need to not be buying as much plastic.
Yeah.
And, you can look at like a piece of cardboard, a cardboard box,
Mm-hmm.
and you say that's recyclable. But as soon as there's a film over it, not recyclable.
Yeah. And I mean, so that's a good point, that we need to be buying less plastic, and I'm fully behind that. But that's so difficult. Like, everything now is wrapped in plastic. I was complaining to my wife recently that we keep buying these sleeves of organic bell peppers that are wrapped in these plastic sleeves that just go right in the trash, and it drives me crazy. It's just ubiquitous.
I have a neighbor whom I met who is a packaging engineer. And when I went to school, I didn't know there was such a thing as a packaging engineer, but they certainly find very creative ways to package things. And every time, the styrofoam, not really recyclable. Those little film airbags that you get when you order something from Amazon, not recyclable.
Yeah.
It keeps everything nice and safe as their UPS is tossing the box into the truck, but you can't recycle it.
Yeah.
And I wish I had the immediate answer right now, because then I'd be that guy with the better mousetrap and making a buck. But it's right now, I guess I'm just the bearer of bad news.
Right. But I mean, so like, I'm sure you get asked all the time, because you work in this business, like, well, so what's the most conscientious way to continue to support recycling and not have this stuff end up in a landfill or get burned?
Well, for the time being, while we're still doing single stream recycling, make sure that what you're putting into your recycling cart or bin is clean.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that when you have a bottle of detergent or milk or something along that you're rinsing it out, that it's clean, that it's not, when you put in there, it's not going to contaminate everything else in there.
Mm-hmm.
Just empty and rinse these things. And that right there will help keep it cleaner. In terms of developing markets along the way, that's going to take a while.
Mm-hmm.
We very much would like to see there be markets, because we make money too, right?
Yeah.
It is good for business.
Yeah, would be a great thing to promote in the United States. In economic development, right? It's always good, right? We always like that stuff.
I work for a company that's called Green for Life, and we do take that seriously. But we also are cognizant of the fact that the market has to drive this to some point. And recyclables are commodities.
All right. Well, I'm not sure that this leaves me feeling any better about the plastics crisis facing planet Earth, but sure appreciate you coming in and shedding some light on it. Joe Munem is Director of Government Affairs and Public Relations for GFL Environmental USA, which is a trash hauler, a composter of municipal yard waste, and a recycler based in Southfield. Joe, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, friends, that'll do it for today's edition of Your Daily Detroit. Thanks as always for listening. Don't forget to tell your friends and family to check us out. And if you don't already, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever fine podcasts are found. For Jer, Cheyenne, and everyone here at Daily Detroit, I'm Sven Gustafson. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.